Welcome in everyone to Stand for Kind, our webinar series on the essence of education. We're so glad that you're joining us today. We are going to explore some exciting topics for educators along the lines of emotional wellness and support for teachers.
I am Kristen Chapman. Also work for Stand for Kind. I am the content and curriculum creator. So I work with Candy and Megan on creating content and curriculum for teachers.
And I'm Candy Olant. I also help to create curriculum for teachers, parents, and students with a big focus on kindness and mental fitness and also implementing leadership skills in our youth.
And I am Megan Osmond. I joined the Stand for Kind crew a while ago after being an educator for about 10 years in public schools. Before that, I was an educator in higher education at Utah State University and at a junior college, Snow College in central Utah. I got out of public education because I had a situation happen with my daughter. She was sexually harassed and I had to remove her from the situation. And so I quit my job and looked for ways to improve the culture and kindness or culture and climate of schools. And I just felt like there was more we could do. And so I joined the Stand for Kind team, and we are creating this webinar to bring emotional wellness and support to teachers. And in order to do this, we decided that we needed to just talk to the teachers themselves and see what the teachers can teach us about how to help them. And so that's where this webinar began. So let's get started. Today, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stand for Kind, what we do, how we work to build a culture and climate to allow optimal growth potential in our schools. I'm going to talk to you about a survey that I gave to the teachers, many teachers, and I was so grateful for all of their responses. And then we're going to kind of synthesize those responses to discover what they are teaching us. And then there was one question on that survey that really piqued my interest. And so we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that single survey question that tells us quite a bit. And the last thing we're going to talk about is what's the take-home message for our policymakers. So when school administration, state administration, legislators are actually discussing education, what is it that they need to clearly ask themselves or understand in order to make really great decisions for policies for education? Okay, so let's get started. Stand for Kind originally started with student programs to build a culture of kindness and inclusion inside our schools. But we soon realized that you cannot help students without also addressing what's going on with teachers because they are interconnected that way. So then we moved to teacher wellness and support, where we offer training and curriculum and tools and conferences and an array of things to help teachers. And then very soon we had meetings with counselors and all of the mental wellness teams inside schools and realized that we can do all the work in the world inside schools, but if we're not also trying to reach the communities outside that school, we're not actually making a big enough movement of change. And therefore, our S4K, we call it S4K Connects, it's our Stand for Kind Connects, movement began. It's an app, and it is to reach our communities. So the S4K Connects creates a community of support all around the schools in order to really enhance what we're doing inside schools. So let me give you just a little bit of history on what happens with Stand for Kind. We began about 14 years ago as an anti-bullying initiative and coalition, and it has grown into a very robust, multifaceted program, and we like to call it a Cheesecake Factory menu of tools for schools that we serve. So administration and teachers can choose from programs that will fit their needs. We don't actually believe in a one size fits all. We don't think that is the approach that education should ever take. We really believe in the power of people, and we believe in the power of people that are on the ground doing the work. They know what the problems are, and they know what they need, and we just listen to them. That's our philosophy and how we kind of run the Stand for Kind programs. So the first one of the tools that we use are assemblies. So we have assemblies, and we have our team that organizes the school assemblies or a community event if that's what your community needs. And they are designed to promote a positive culture in school. It raises safety awareness. You can choose from an array of subjects that the assemblies can be about. We have a bunch of speakers and performers that are on hand to do those things. And we have found that these are fantastic ways of breaking the stigma of mental health inside our school systems and really getting people talking about this. And the assemblies are so fun and engaging and entertaining. It is not something that your kiddos or your students are really going to forget anytime soon. And so this is a lot how we like to kick off our programs, to start this kind of just keep this conversation rolling. So our assemblies are one of the things we do. Another thing we do is our ambassadors. So we really believe, once again, we believe in people. We believe that students really do have the power to recognize what's going on into their schools, and then to make changes. And we also believe that the kids want to. And that is what we have seen inside our schools, is when we create an ambassador program with the focus on mental health, we have seen these kiddos, this ambassador groups, really make a difference with their peers and the environment and culture and what is acceptable inside the schools. So let me just give you one little small example that was something that happened with one of our ambassador groups that I was just so impressed with. In one of our schools, there was a huge amount of support for the football team, but there wasn't any support for the soccer team that was going on in the same season. And so our ambassador group thought, this isn't cool. Our soccer team is not feeling very loved and supported, but the football team, everybody in the whole community shows up to support at the football games. And so the ambassador group decided to talk to the football coach, and they just asked the football coach, hey, do you think after practice your football team could just come down and watch the soccer boys play their game? And the coach was awesome. The football coach was like, absolutely. And so he did it even better. He stopped practice early. He told his football team, you know what? Nobody ever really supports these guys, and they're always at your football team, or your football games. So would you guys like to go down and really support these soccer players? And the team was like, yeah, we will. And so not only did they say yes, they actually picked up the stadium chairs, the benches, the bleachers. They picked up the stadium. The whole football team just grabbed the stadium bleachers, hauled it down to the soccer field. The whole football team jumped onto these bleachers and cheered for the soccer team that day. And I think it started a movement where they started to do this. After the soccer game, the opposing team's coach came to their soccer coach and said, how are you doing that? How did you get these people to come and support your soccer games? No one comes to our soccer games. And he said, well, we've got this really cool ambassador group that is looking for opportunities like that to help. Now, we as a Stand for Kind team would not have thought of this. We wouldn't have even known that the soccer team wasn't getting any attention. But the kids know. The kids know. And so our ambassador groups, that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to empower the kiddos to make the changes necessary inside their schools. And they want to. And it's a wonderful tier 2 opportunity, as far as if you're familiar with the tier system of trying to address mental health needs inside schools. It is the perfect fit for a tier 2 intervention. The other thing we have are summer camps, and we've been a part of those, and they are life-changing. I have seen kiddos come and learn from the lessons that we teach on relationships and suicide prevention and communication and leadership. And you can see in this picture, we did a ropes course, and they were encouraged to do this ropes course blind, to put a blindfold on and use each other as teammates to coach each other across. It was quite impactful. All right. So the next thing we do are we have a robust system of support for educators and parents. So for educators, we have webinars, we have professional development, we have toolkits, training, preventative training, we have curriculum. For parents, we have toolkits, resources both locally and nationally. We have lessons to support, and we have hotlines for help. Parents are in this battle too, and they are key in needing help, and talking to their kids. And not all. Sometimes we're just learning to be parents, so we need the resources as well as parents. Okay, so let's move on to our educator survey. So our educator survey, we at the Stand for Kind team, as we were trying to discuss the actual essence of education, like how do we really get to this? We thought, what better way than to ask our educators? They are the experts in this. So we sent out a survey to hundreds of educators, and these are the 5 questions we asked them to answer. So why did you want to become a teacher? What is your favorite part of the job? How have you found ways to maintain a love of children and teaching in an environment that gets more complicated and challenging? What advice would you give someone thinking about going into the teaching profession? And finally, what specifically would you change in education to improve the overall experience? So this was quite fascinating, and we didn't know what we were going to get as a result, but this is what we found. So number 1, why did you want to become a teacher? We synthesized all the responses, and these are 4 themes that sort of emerged out of those responses, or 4 categories. And the first was, this is no surprise to anybody in education, to serve and help others. And the second one was they love learning, and they love seeing others learn, and they love to share their passion. So that's the second category. The third was they love a challenge, they love the variety, and they love the flexibility or the change in there's not many careers that offer you that kind of change all the time. And so they loved that. And then the fourth one was they either loved the schedule. You had a lot of moms who wanted to be on the same schedule as their kids and have summers off, or they were influenced by really great teachers as they were growing up and wanted to have the same influence. So those were the four themes that sort of emerged from that. The second question, what is your favorite part of the job? There was 3 themes that emerged. The first one was interacting with students. That's what they loved. They just loved their interactions with their students. The second one was helping the students learn. They really loved being in that service capacity. And the third one was seeing the students succeed. And those answers were really fun for me to read through on that category, because there was one who said, I always feel so great when the student themselves, I didn't give up on the student, and then the student themselves didn't give up either, and then they walk across the stage at graduation. Anyway, the anecdotal story that she told was beautiful, and those answers to those questions were really, really fun for me to read. The third question from me was the most telling. So the third question was, how have you found ways to maintain a love of children and teaching in an environment that gets more complicated and challenging? 100% of the surveys came back with some version of the same answer. And the same answer was by focusing on students. Now, I don't know if you have no experience inside education, you probably will not recognize the significance of 100% of teachers saying the same thing. But if you've ever been in a faculty meeting, you know that those educators are passionate people, and they feel strongly about whatever part of education either their content area or a certain thing inside education, they become very passionate. But very rarely do you have them all passionate about one thing. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever been in a faculty meeting where everybody in the room agreed on one thing. And so when 100% of the survey results came back, I thought, this needs looking into. We need to dive a little deeper. But before I do that, let me finish out the last 2 educator survey results. And that is, what advice would you give to someone thinking about going into the teaching profession? There were no themes here. Every single survey, I couldn't even categorize them. I couldn't even categorize them into positive and negative. There was no themes. They're almost all of them, 100% of them, were a cautionary tale. And here's a few examples. One said, run. Teaching is hard. Don't plan on a lunch break. This is hard work. And the other one said, know that teaching is hard physically, mentally, and emotionally. And this is just 2 examples of many that said you need to think long and hard about this before you decide to do it. But it was very varied. There was one who said, you really think about getting a master's degree within the first 5 years of school. I thought that was fascinating. Another one who said, if you get into the teaching profession and you don't like it, quit. And I thought that was really funny. But then they went on to say, we need really great teachers. And if this is something that you don't love, then get out. And I thought that was fascinating. But that's kind of shows you just how varied these responses were. I really could not categorize them. They were too vastly different to even categorize. And then the final question was, what specifically would you change in education to improve the overall experience? And 4 themes arose in these responses. And the first one was get rid of standardized tests. And the second one was allow teachers to do what's best for their students. The third was get rid of phones. And the fourth was no more new canned initiative or programs. So they didn't. Anyway, I'll leave that there, and you can interpret that how you like. We're going to go in a little deeper onto that third question because, like I said, it is quite unique for 100% of the surveys to come back with some variation of the almost. I can't say all of them, but for the majority, they used almost the exact same words. So that is definitely worth looking into a little deeper. So let's take a deeper dive onto that. So I went back to the teachers and decided to ask a little more specifically. So if the most important thing was to focus on students, if that essentially is the essence, when we're talking about the essence of education, we hit on the answers from these teachers. And the essence of education is a focus on students. Then what is it in our education systems that keep you from focusing on those students? So we took a deeper dive. I took a variety of teachers. I interviewed 5 different teachers that agreed to do an interview on camera. A lot of teachers are very camera shy. Not everybody loves to be on camera. And even these teachers, I wouldn't say love to be on camera, but they were gracious enough to allow me to interview them. And so we have 5 teachers here. We have one that's a fairly new teacher, less than 5 years of teaching. We have one who's a veteran teacher. He's just about ready to retire. And then we have 3 that are right in the middle, somewhere between 10 and 20 years of teaching. What keeps you from focusing on kids? What are the things inside the system of education that stop you or prevent you from focusing on kids? And so this is their answers. So to summarize, we have achievement is the first category really is time and space for relationships. So what is missing in our education system is time and space for relationships. To summarize their videos, they basically are talking about that achievement is directly tied to relationships, that class size can hinder the growth of relationships because you can't get to all the kids and build those relationships that are needed, and that really anything at all that detracts from relationships should be closely examined to determine if it's really necessary for our school settings. Now I'm going to pause right here and let's just listen to what the teachers have to say about this.
Ultimately what happens between a teacher and a student happens in the classroom. So the easy answer would be to say anything that demands a teacher's time or attention outside the classroom interferes with what they do. But that's a little bit too simplistic because you don't teach in a vacuum. and you can't do it all by yourself. There's a lot of things that make that possible. So it's a little hard to distinguish what things are necessary evil, so to speak,
Right.
and what things are superfluous, and what things actually get in the way.
Right.
But I think I'll go back to the word relationships.
Okay.
Relationships are what make good teachers good teachers. Lots of people can be good at math or know their history or be able to diagram a sentence, but unless you're good at relationships, you're probably not going to be a good teacher. And relationships take time. So anything that takes too much of a teacher's time outside of their curriculum and dealing with their students in the classroom is probably what I would say gets in the way of that.
Okay.
First, large class sizes. And I think the reason why that distracts from having a relationship, I should look at this, having a relationship with the kids is because there are too many kids to develop a relationship with. So we're trying to teach and get to know these kids and where they're at, not only in life, but with the things that you need them to know, and at the same time manage this very large group of teenagers. That funnels right into my next thing that I decided was something that distracted me from being able to have quality relationships with students is testing. All of the standardized testing. We have district level standardized testing and state level standardized testing. Should those go away, we have to have something to be able to decide whether or not the kids are getting it. But again, I'm the expert in my classroom, and I don't feel like this extra standardized testing is flowing organically from or accurately testing my curriculum that's already strictly regimented by the standards that have been mandated at the state and district level.
So when I think of like one overarching thing, I think it's time. Because teachers are limited on time because you have to work on this because your district's requiring it, or you've got to work on this because the state is requiring it, and so there's not the time to create the relationship that I think is needed because so many kids are struggling, but you can't reach them because you're busy doing all the busy work. And the system is built that way because there's checks and balances, but the checks and balances don't match up with what's really important with education. But
Okay. Tell me about it.
so when Kim was our principal, there was an hour. You had an hour for planning, but then you had an hour for teaming. And your team would get together every single day, and you would talk about your students every single day. And so you had your planning, so you were still able to get your stuff done, but you also could like figure out what's going on with these kids. You could address issues. Kim would go do home visits. You as a teacher, if that was the time, you could call parents in and talk with parents. But because of time and the state regulating or the district regulating, they took that hour away from us. So now we can only team once a week for 20 minutes. So we went from a whole class period every day to 20 minutes a day, and relationships have suffered since.
Okay.
Absolutely no doubt.
Okay, now let's move on. The second theme that emerged from these interviews were that the teaching restrictions and systems are often in place that detract from the relationships, this very essence of education, which is the relationship between a teacher and a student. Once again, I'm going to summarize the responses, and then I'm going to let you listen to their words. So to summarize, standardized testing is not reflective of real learning. We often have evaluation systems that are counterintuitive to organic learning. The systems are often broken and destroy students' desire to learn. We oftentimes teach to a test because these tests have taken a paramount importance, and it is breaking down students' curiosity and desire to learn. There are teaching restrictions, or often one teacher talked about boxes that the teachers are forced to stay in while trying to meet these complex needs. So it restricts the teacher's ability to use creative, innovative ways of reaching students because we're asked to stay inside these boxes. So now let's pause for just a minute and listen to what the teachers have to teach us.
You know what I would love to do with kids? Just read and enjoy and really get down into some discussions about literature. And I'm happy to teach them about, all of the literary devices and how they wrote this and what it changed about the meaning. I want to talk about that stuff. But if I could get rid of all of those check marks, those standards that you have to pass this standard, and make sure you label all your assignments with these standards so that we know that you're getting the standards to the kids. If I could help foster a love of reading that kids can continue to have throughout their life, and I would say reading would be synonymous with wanting to learn more and find things out for themselves. I think all of these different assignments that we have to tie to the reading in order to be able to know whether or not they met the standard distracts from being able to get them to the books, get them learning. I feel like in the system that starts so early on. My kid is in kindergarten right now, and he loves school. He wants to go to school. He loves whatever they send home with them. He wants to show me. He loves to read the stuff that they send, the little booklets and things. And I don't know when that stops, but we've done something wrong, because when I get those same kids in high school, they hate reading. They haven't read anything for real in years. They just look it up on the internet. And so somewhere we've taken away that desire to learn. And I think it's because we're pushing too much curriculum too soon. And maybe overall we're just pushing too much. If we could just foster this love of learning and this desire to find out, we wouldn't have to worry about whether or not a kid knows what a simile is or how to punctuate a sentence correctly, because they would want to know that.
Okay, so things that help that restrict me from focusing on students are restrictions in education, as far as standards that we have to teach, and when we come into a classroom, we have multiple teachers that teach the same subject. So I teach life science currently. And so with the other teachers that I work with, we have to be teaching reaching the same standards about the same time and about the same way. Not exactly, but it's still difficult because in our PLCs we're supposed to have common exams, and we're supposed to have common threads, and as such, we have to be teaching the same thing. I mean, it's difficult to reach the same standard, to answer the same questions in the same way, using the same vocabulary, without following the same plan. And that having been said, we have certain things that we teach, so we have to teach, but I'd like to teach it one way, and my cohorts would like to teach it a different way. And so we have to come up with a similar plan, and we have to give and we have to take, taking away from our freedom to be able to teach the way we want to teach. So in our school district, we have there, and I think across the state of Wyoming, I don't think we have requirements to go into high school. And as such, if they fail all of their classes and have D's and F's or worse, they move on. And so therefore they're free to do what they want, to disrupt class, to not participate as they please. And as such, it really does detract from the opportunities of other students and me as a teacher to be able to teach them.
Well, there's a lot of boxes in education that you're forced to work within. So you have like Common Core standards, right? And like as an English teacher, we have a lot of those.
Yes.
We have speaking and listening, we've got writing, we've got reading literature, we got reading informational texts, we got like language. There's a lot. And on top of that, you also have your professional developments, you have your PLC groups, you have your grade level PLC groups, you have, there's just a lot of boxes. So, that's a big hindrance because there's all these other things that like distract you, from doing what you need to, but also you're expected to like work within that box, to make something work. Because I don't know if all those things actually give you the tools that you need to like do what you need to, because teachers should be able to be creative and think and find the best way to reach your students.
Okay, so finally, when I asked what keeps you from focusing on students, the conversation naturally seemed to move to how do we keep good educators? How do these educators that are masters of relationships, and those relationships build foundations of amazing learning opportunities? So what happens in this system and why are they leaving en masse? The statistics show that teachers, 50%, I think that's the statistic I read most recently, was 50% of our teachers are leaving the field of education within the first 5 years. Why? Why is this? What is going on inside our systems of education that are making good people and good teachers run the other way? So the summary of what they told me was we need to really incentivize what's most important. Now, I hope you're hearing what the teachers are telling you about what's most important, and that is the relationships, the focus on students, and the relationships between the teachers and students. And then trust teachers to create authentic learning opportunities. There has been a breakdown in this trust of teachers. And then evaluation systems that are more reflective of what matters the most. That's what the teachers are asking for. Evaluation systems that actually focus on these relationships and what's happening inside of classroom rather than rote boxes. It's just a box to check. It's just a system to navigate and doesn't really reflect what this essence of education. And then lastly, to remember why we teach. So I'm going to pause here and let you see what the teachers have to say about how we keep good educators in our system. What needs to happen inside the system to help educators want to stay?
So a pay scale has to incentivize teachers to stay in the profession.
Right.
I think we want to feel appreciated. I think we don't want to see people with similar education who are putting forth the same or less time and making more money in other industries. Money is just money, but money also speaks of value. When I'm not willing to pay as much for something, I don't value it as much. Right. If I am willing to pay more, I'm generally saying I recognize the quality and I recognize the necessity of this is why I'm willing to pay more. Yeah, lane changes and cost of living increases, they have to keep pace with what inflation does in our country. Lane changes, you have to give a teacher a place to go. Teachers quit when they feel like they've hit a dead end, and I think most people do. When they look around and say, I can't do any better than I'm doing, and there is no way to do better, that's when you start thinking about quitting or you start thinking about finding other professions, right? And you have to say, how can we extend your teaching career? How can we keep you teaching even if it's just another 3 to 5 years as opposed to quitting the minute you can?
Right.
And as I said earlier, you have to incentivize the teacher to say. The teacher has to be able to say it's worth my time and worth my effort, or I at least need to feel appreciated enough to stay, as opposed to finding none of those things facing you and saying it's time to leave. Yeah, anybody who's come into education and started in the classroom, as most educators do, they start in the classroom, they start to look at their future, the next 30 years in the profession. And in most cases, the only way to have any type of upward mobility financially or also in terms of power or say-so is to become an administrator. And so I think oftentimes we find too many of our good educators leaving the classroom to become administrators, like I said, either for money or influence or both. And those teachers probably would serve education better had they stayed in the classroom. And so when we look at teachers, when we talk about highly qualified, those are the teachers that we need to say, because you're highly qualified, because you spend a lot of money for this education, because you can offer so much to your subject and your department, we want to keep you in the classroom and give you a chance to still move up as an administrator would.
Okay, to conclude, we really wanted to conclude with a piece for policymakers. So we're trying to synthesize all of the survey data, all of this interviews with our fantastic teachers, and we're trying to give a message to policymakers, whether that's at a building level, whether that's at a district level, whether that's at a state level. I would love it if this went all the way to national level. But in any case, it doesn't matter whether it happens in your building, in your state, at a national level. This is the message that we synthesized out of what we heard from our teachers. And these are 3 questions that you need to ask yourself anytime you're creating policy or approving policy. Number 1, what relationships will this policy help or hurt? Number 2, is this policy giving time and space to relationships, which we have discovered are the essence of education? And number 3, is this policy creating an environment of optimal growth on the foundation of relationships? So if growth comes from that magic relationships that happen inside classrooms, what is this policy doing to that? So if you were a legislator and a bill was crossing your desk and you could not answer positively to these 3 questions, I would beg that you reach out to an educator and ask why and what's most important, and will this policy help or hurt that? We really believe at Stand for Kind that when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. The essence of education is a belief in children and the people who serve those children. And so really our job as policymakers or advocates like we are education advocates, is to help improve the environment that will enhance this optimal growth for our students. Thank you. If you have any questions, here is a slide of information of how to get to us. We would love to come to your schools. We would love to present. We would love to bring our assemblies and our ambassador programs and whatever else you need. Like I said, we have a Cheesecake Factory menu for you to choose from. And then we also have this Stand for Kind Connects app that we are now putting into communities and businesses to help the communities that help the schools. We're trying to build a network of support for our schools through local businesses around those schools. And finally, we have a standforkind.com. Here's a QR code. You please take a look at it. Call us. There's several ways of contacting us on this website. Please navigate through it, see what you think, and then let us know if there's anything we can do to serve you. Thank you.